Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your Audio Amigo, here today with another Audio Amigo review for you guys. Today we're going to be looking at a set from Dunu that I've been interested in ever since it released. These are the third IEM in the Dunu DK3001 family. These are the DK3001 BD, or BrainDance as I'm going to be calling them. These continue on from the original DK3001 and the DK3001 Pro. These feature 9 drivers per side. You get 4 BAs, 4 microplanars, and the dynamic driver out of Dunu's flagship Glacier IEM. Coming in at a price of $500, are these going to shake up the market and do their ancestors proud? Let's find out. Quick shout out to Tha Slaya, who sent me this set on loan for review. I have had it for far too long, and I feel super guilty, but also super grateful. Thank you so much, man. He's an awesome guy, great dude. Please make sure to go check out his reviews in the description down below. He does excellent reviews. Thank you so much again. I really appreciate the loan. This is headed back to you with some stuff for you to check out. So yeah, thank you very much. So if there's one thing that I've noticed about Dunu's unboxing presentation is that they like to give you everything you need to use and maintain your IEM efficiently from the word go. Here on the BrainDance, you get the IEMs themselves. You get a white version of Dunu's modular sort of shoelace cable, which we'll talk about in a second. That comes with 3.5 as well as 4.4 millimeter adapters, and then you get a really nice 1/4-inch adapter. I think Dunu makes one of the better looking 1/4-inch adapters in the business, so it's really happy that they include it here. You also get a shirt clip, which y'all know I love to see. You also get a cleaning tool, which is right here. Again, always like to see a cleaning tool. You also get a set of IEM booties, a nice white carry case, a Dunu branded microfiber cleaning cloth, which is nice, and then you get 4 sets of ear tips, which is quite nice. So you get these white standard sort of silicone tips, which Dunu calls their balance tips. You get a full set of Dunu's nice S&S tips in small, medium, large, and extra large, which is always nice to see. You also get their red core atmosphere tips here, and a full set of Dunu's premium candy ear tips. And they come in tip cases, which is always nice to have. The carry case here reminds me of basically a blown up and white version of Moondrop's sort of blue leather magnet closure case. It's got a soft interior and a little felt mesh pouch here to carry things around in. This paired with the IEM booty should mean that there's no risk of those gorgeous white shells ever getting bumped or scratched up. This case is a bit too large to be pocketable, and it does feel a little bit flimsy. This will be fine for like man pockets, but this is really more of a purse case or a backpack case rather than a full-size pocket case. That said, leather does feel quite nice, even if it doesn't have a whole lot of crush protection. Overall, the accessories package is pretty awesome. It's exactly the sort of thing I expect out of a $500 set. I think it's very well done. Thank you, Dunu, for giving us what we expect from an unboxing experience at this price range. So let's take a look at that Dunu modular shoelace cable, as I called it. Yeah, this is essentially the exact same cable that you get on the Dunu Kima 2 and the Titan S2, but it has white wires instead of the gray on the other ones. As with the Titan S2 and the Kima 2, I have my complaints. The bottom half of this cable does not feel nice in the hands. I mean, it's cloth, but it's a little bit grainy, if you know what I mean. It's very memory prone. It doesn't like to sit in certain directions. It's kind of annoying when you're walking with it or sitting in a chair with it and the cable's at an awkward angle. While the top half is nice and white, the coating on the wires feels quite rubbery and cheap, and I wish it sort of matched the lower half more, or if the lower half was this exact same color with maybe a different plastic coating. The chin slider is very functional and slides very securely, but it's just clear plastic, and for a set that has such nice matching metal hardware with Dunu branding on it, I wish that this was also metal. It does have some upsides. These ear hooks are extremely comfortable, and the connectors have very clear right and left branding on them. I do wish they were color-coded instead of just sort of outlined, but it is nice to see. I also said, really love the hardware here. It's quite nice, and the Q-Lock, screw modular termination is one of my favorite systems. You can get the USB C DAC adapter for this. I think it's like $8-10. Pretty affordable. I'm not a fan of this cable. I know I got a little bit of flack in my Titan S2 and Kima 2 reviews for not really liking this cable. I don't know. I would much rather have the Leo cable that comes on the DaVinci here on the BrainDance. Doesn't really make sense to me. They would include the cable from the cheaper sets on the BrainDance when the cable from the DaVinci, which is 300 bucks, I think is a much better fit. Yeah, it's the wrong color, but color changing a cable like the Leo wouldn't be too difficult, and I think it would just be overall a better fit for the BrainDance than the shoelace cable that they've given us here. So that's the cable. Let's take a look at the IEMs themselves. The BrainDance here are one solidly built set of IEMs. I'll say really quickly that these, as you can see, are the MMCX version of the BrainDance. They do come in a standard 2-pin version if you prefer that connection. These are full CNC milled aluminum alloy shells with a zirconium ceramic coating on them for that white color, and then a little bit of added flare, which we'll discuss a little bit later. The nozzles are metal and are a separate assembly to the lower shells. They have a metal mesh recessed into them to protect from debris, and you'll notice that there's no ventilation anywhere on the sides or inside of these IEMs for those 9 drivers. There is, however, 9 little holes here on the faceplate, as well as those 2 slots sort of above and below the numbers. That may not look like a lot of ventilation, but honestly, I didn't have any pressure buildup issues with these. I didn't have any driver flex, so those small vents, more than enough for what's happening here. The shape is standard, but very sort of thick. You can see how tall the profile of the IEM is there. There's a tiny little comfort divot here and a little bit of a comfort wing, but in all honesty, it's pretty much your standard IEM shape. There's no protrusions or bulges to get in the way. The seam here is visible, and it does catch on the nail depending on where you're running your fingers along it. It's not something that bothers you in ear. I'll discuss that a little bit later. It's not uncomfortable. It's just, a seam. You're going to get that on basically all metal shells. Yeah, I think this is well built. I think they'll be nice and solid. They'll be able to shrug off drops, nicks, bumps, all that sort of thing. Nice job, Dunu. Very well built. So let's talk specs here. The BrainDance are a 9-driver tribrid. You've got the 10mm biocomposite dynamic driver from the Dunu Glacier. You've got 2 custom balanced armatures for the mid-range, 2 custom balanced armatures for the highs, as well as 2 microplanars handling the sort of ultra-high air frequencies. You would think 9 drivers would be difficult to drive, but every single source I tried, from my 5th gen iPod to my cassette Walkman, powered these just fine, so you shouldn't need to go out and buy a dedicated DAC or amp for this. These are a little bit on the heavier side thanks to those chunky metal shells, but they're also nowhere near as heavy as something like the Kato or the SimGot ET142. The nozzles are a little bit on the larger side at 6.5mm in diameter. I don't think they will do too well on the tiny ears test, just the weight, the size, the big nozzles. We'll see about that later. The 4-way crossover that Dunu has here does mean that they will change sound when exposed to higher impedance sources or impedance adapters, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. Overall, other than the sort of sheer number of drivers that you have in there, there's nothing really crazy in terms of specs here. But now we're going to come to the cool wall. The BrainDance, I think, are going to be a bit of a polarizing set. You're either going to love them or you're going to hate them. And I personally absolutely adore the cyberpunk aesthetic here. I only really have one critique of these, and that's that they don't come in more colors. I would love a green and purple, or a sort of black and neon pink, or neon green, maybe some blue. Orange and white, I think, is pretty classic, and I think it would look amazing next to an orange Hiby R4. I love the numbers, the arrows indicating what direction it is, where the connectors are. Reminds me of the markings on sort of a fighter jet. I don't know. I just really vibe with the aesthetic of these overall. They're going to go straight into Sub-Zero for me personally. I really love them. They could be even more Sub-Zero if they were like purple and green or some other sort of neon cyberpunky colors. But yeah, food for thought, Dunu. Consider some colors. I already think they look fantastic. But my taste is questionable, so let's go ahead and see what the Council of Ladies has to say about these. Starting off with, are these pretty? We have a vote of 2 yeses, 2 nos, and a meh. Lady number 3 really didn't want to be the deciding factor here. Moving into compliments, we see 1 and 4 against the giving out of compliments. It's interesting because lady number 3 voted meh on the looks of these, and she's the only one who would hand out compliments. Let's go ahead and see if she can explain why in her thoughts. Overall, honestly, it looks like we have some pretty positive sentiments from the ladies, at least as I read them. Maybe they acknowledge these as being cool, but they don't really vibe with them personally, which would make sense to me. I would interpret a lot of these comments as being net positive, so Dunu, if you're watching, don't take this too harshly. It's not all about the score. Give us more cyberpunk designs, please. So, big shells, big nozzles, how is the comfort? Honestly, for me, no issue at all. My ears are large, so the big shells and wide nozzles were no problem. I could wear these for long periods of time in terms of comfort with no hot spots, no soreness, no problems whatsoever. Super comfy. My wife, on the other hand, did fail these relatively quickly. They didn't quite get laughably bad like I was expecting them to, but they did score a straight up bad. They did take her tips, and she was able to make a seal, but it failed when she sort of did basic facial expressions or started, eating or talking. They just ended up sliding out of her ears very easily, and she couldn't maintain a seal unless her face was, perfectly unmoving. They did better than I was expecting to, just watching her do the testing, considering how, massive and thick these shells are. So, I would say give them a try, but if you struggle with, thicker, bigger IEMs, then maybe don't put all your hopes on these actually fitting your ears. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into how the BrainDance here sound. They came out of the gates swinging. Really nice, deep sub-bass boost on the BrainDance. The deep bass notes in Earth, Wind, and Fire's The Way You Move, and by extension, Outkast's cover of it. All those notes had great rumble, excellent texture. It was a really pleasant surprise to see that DD from the Glacier honestly doing its thing just like it did there here on the BrainDance. Unlike the Glacier, however, the BrainDance here does have a more noticeable mid-bass tuck. I'm just more used to the bass guitar and the kick drums having a little bit more oomph to them, specifically in Redbone's Come and Get Your Love. It's still a good replay, it's an enjoyable listen, the piano and the rest of the instruments sounded very clear as a result, but the track just, I don't know, it sounded a little bit flat and thin to my tastes. I'm getting ahead of myself, that's more of the next section, but the sub bass here I would say is really awesome. The mid bass has a very noticeable tuck, which honestly, personally, is not my thing, but I know lots of folks who will absolutely love that, so yeah, I'd say good overall. So, as I just mentioned, the BrainDance has a noticeable mid bass tuck. What that does is it makes the lower mid sound crisp, clean, clear, transparent, if you like. Again, I personally wish they had a bit more warmth to them. I think they're lacking a little bit in terms of body or note weight. Godsmack's I Stand Alone, for example, extremely clean replay, super crisp. But the bass guitar and the kick drums just sounded lacking. They were thin. The vocals also were missing a bit of grunt or sort of warmth and graveliness that I tend to enjoy on slightly warmer tune sets. Again, if you're into that super crystal clear lower mids thing, these will 100% be your style, and I get the appeal. It's a great replay. They just wouldn't be my preference for daily use. I just prefer a bit of a warmer sound down here. Female vocals are interesting. They aren't super forward in terms of where they sit in reference to the rest of the mix. I would say they're roughly in line with what I would call a neutral vocal presentation, but the clean lower mids combined with the upper mid-range energy, which we're going to talk about in a second, makes them come across a bit more energetic than they actually are. Angela's Zenryoku Summer, for example. Atsuko's vocals feel like they're in line with the rest of the instrumentation, but they somehow feel like they have a slight spotlight on them. The harmonics do a really good job bringing her forward without seeming forward in an unnatural way. It's quite nice. I honestly dig the female vocal presentation here. Mids overall, I would say, are super clean and very well executed. If you love crisp, clear lower mids and ever so slightly emphasized female vocals while still sounding natural, I think the BrainDance has got you covered. Since we're moving into the upper mids and treble, let's go ahead and discuss those upper mids that help the vocals stand out. Harmonics on this set are very forward, but not in a super fatiguing way. I used La Oreja de Van Gogh's Rosas. It's a good test for vocal fatigue. Amaya Moreno's sort of Castilian lisp as she's singing has the potential to really grate on your ears, especially if you're sensitive to sibilants. And honestly, didn't bother me at all here. The harmonics thrown off by her echo and the harmonies with herself was, I think, wonderfully energetic. It really helped the fundamentals of the vocals stand out just the right amount. What did grate on me, however, were the shakers and the hi-hats and the percussion. And it was a really interesting sort of thing to listen to because the BrainDance here, to me, was a combination of sort of that stealth fatigue that sets in over a long period of time and certain frequencies that sort of exacerbate it depending on the track. Pierre Henry's Psych Rock, for example, was an interesting listening experience. At the beginning of the track, those sweeps in your ears really didn't grate or bother me at all. But by the end of the track, some segments of the sweeps were beginning to make me want to have to turn the volume down. It was very strange. I don't know exactly where the frequency that's bothering me here is, but it is bothering me. It's sort of will fatigue me slowly over time. I can listen to these for about 45 minutes to an hour, but if I listen to a specific set of songs, particularly some jazz albums had a bit of graininess to the treble. I just didn't dig that grainy sort of texture to some of the cymbals and hi-hats in some jazz albums that I heard. But those did exacerbate the problem and sped up that sort of stealth fatigue. Maybe that contributed, I don't know. Overall, the treble is sparkly, engaging, extremely detailed, a little bit grainy, but again, I think I'm getting ahead of myself in how technical these sound. So let's go ahead and talk about it now. The combination of the Glacier's dynamic driver and 8 different drivers for the rest of the range has an awesome technical potential here. The electronic drum and bass in the background of Hiroshima's Lady of Mystery is very subtle. You can barely hear them in the mix, but on sets with good bass response, you can pick up on some great finger texture, and the ADSR envelope of the electronic drums, they sort of combine in the quiet background of the track to make for some pretty technical, performance stuff here. It's really good replay on the BrainDance. At the upper end of the frequency range, the BrainDance did about as I expected on my Waltz for Debbie Listen for the Glassware test. The BrainDance really pushed all of that subtle detail forward and into your face. The cleanliness of the mid-range and the sort of slight focus on vocals helped the conversations in the background come a bit forward. I would say compared to other tribrid and hybrid IEMs that I've tested, this is definitely above the Performer 7 in terms of sheer technical ability. It did trade blows, I feel, with the Mega5Est and the XuanWu Gate here. It just wasn't able to touch the Cantor. The Cantor is still king here. However, all 3 of these cost more than the BrainDance here does, so in terms of technicalities per dollar, Dunu did an excellent job here. Technical showcase for sure. Stereo separation, as you would expect, is also pretty fantastic. Scarborough Fair sounded super sort of stereo. You've got the different instruments in each ear with the vocals filling in the space in the middle very nicely. Fantastic replay on this track, was great to listen to. The perceived 3D soundstage on the BrainDance, I think, is also excellent. Well-mastered tracks sound just that little bit taller, wider, and deeper than, typical for IEMs. The Who's Pinball Wizard, for example, very stereo track, but I think also has fantastic imaging and good spatial cues. You can point out the guitar, the drums, the bass, all around you in the field. Wonderful replay, brings out a nice open soundstage, especially for IEMs here. Overall, I would say stereo separation, perceived 3D soundstage, good compared to other IEMs, but at $500, I expect that of the BrainDance, and it did not disappoint. But now let's talk about using the BrainDance with an impedance adapter or on a higher output impedance source. So here's the graph. To me, this is a pretty good transformation here. The fatigue on the high end is slightly toned down, and the already rumbly sub-bass gets even more rumbly and crazy. You do lose some of that technical showcase of this IEM. It's just part of the trade-off. You increase the bass, you decrease the treble like that, you're going to lose some of that technical chops. But the reduction in treble and the warmer, richer lower mids, as you can see, I think helps change the BrainDance into something much more in line with my typical tastes. If you have the Truthier Zero Red or you own a Ruyi Rod cable, it can be a nice second tuning to unlock on the BrainDance here if you get the 2-pin version. Would I personally daily drive that tuning? I go back and forth through my listening. Sometimes I think, oh yeah, I'm just going to put a permanent Ruyi Rod cable on here and rock it forever. And other days I'm like, man, I really miss that sort of technical, ability that it had. The treble is lower, and I can listen to it with an impedance adapter for longer. But like I said, I do end up missing that, super technical detail, analytical sound from the stock tuning. For me, it would be a sort of sometimes sound that I would rock. I honestly think Dunu should include their wonderful 30 ohm adapter in the package to just give people the option of the second tuning. I think it'd be a no-brainer. So, the BrainDance. To my ears, it has a couple of Harman-ish traits, but it's also too distinct from Harman to be really Harman-ish. It exhibits some of the things that I dislike about Harman. It's got the super thin lower mids and the mid-bass tuck that I really don't prefer, but it's less shouty, it's not as vocal forward, and it sort of pushes that energy out into the upper treble rather than the upper mids. This is a set that is chasing pure detail, technical, analytical performance above basically everything else. And the fatigue and the thinness in the mid-bass and lower mids is the price that you pay for that technical performance. It's a sacrifice that lots of people would be willing to make, and I don't have a whole lot in this price range, period, let alone stuff with this tuning, but I've gone ahead and rounded up some sets that I think make for an interesting comparison. Like I said, just remember, I don't have a whole lot of this price range, so this is the best I can do. We'll go ahead and start with my most recent acquisition, my first ever Myer audio IEM. It's the interestingly named Sliivo SLT6, priced at $450 US. For this comparison, I have it in the high sensitivity mode, which is both of the switches turned to their on positions. For starters, the BrainDance came off sounding more V-shaped than the SLT6. It's got more sub-bass rumble, it's got a good deal more sparkle and shine in the treble, but the SLT6 does have that extra richness in the lower mids that I tend to prefer. The SLT6 surprisingly has more mid-bass punch, which was interesting to me considering this is 6 BAs versus the DD from the Glacier. This is also more vocal forward without getting super shouty. In terms of detail retrieval and sort of overall resolution, it's going to come down in all of these comparisons to how you personally perceive details. But in my testing with my tracks, I found the BrainDance to be the more resolving of the two. The difference was there in A/B testing, but I don't think it was, completely game-changing. The SLT6 is less fatiguing across the board, so that's something to consider if you're going to be looking into one of these two sets. Next, we have one of the most critically acclaimed sets in this price range. It's the Mid-Fi Meta Marvel, the HiSenior Mega5Est, priced at $550 US. This was sort of an interesting comparison to me because I didn't find the Mega5Est fatiguing, and these two take actually a pretty similar approach to the upper mids and treble. The place where they take a different approach, however, is the bass. The BrainDance goes full, Harmon-ish sort of sub-bass focus with mid-bass tuck, while the Mega5Est goes for a more gradual mid-bass forward sound with the sort of richer, warmer lower mids that come along with it. In terms of pure detail retrieval and resolution, honestly, I think the BrainDance is the equal of the Mega5Est. It's so forward with the fine details that they're just a little bit easier to hear. The details, however, are there on the Mega5Est. They're just a little bit further back, a little bit more relaxing to hear. Again, it's going to come down to how you personally perceive detail. There are some tracks where I think the Mega5Est wins. There's some tracks where I think the BrainDance wins out. Once again, Mega5Est, for me at least, not as fatiguing as the BrainDance was. So personally, I'll take this one. Similar level of details, maybe not as forward with some of them, but much more relaxing to listen to in the long run. Real quick, I wanted to bring this one, and it's another new-ish set. This is Tangzu's flagship IEM, no matter what they might say about the Baji. This is the XuanWu Gate, priced at $650 US. In terms of tuning, the XuanWu Gate is probably the most neutral sounding IEM on this table. It's packing a tiny bit of extra brightness and a tiny bit of a sub-bass boost, and that's it. It's an extremely subtle coloration that is kind of fun to listen to if you're looking for just that tiny bit of extra color. The BrainDance is bassier, brighter, airier. It is leaner and thinner in the lower mids once again. It's definitely the more exciting listening experience here. The Gate it's just slightly, neutral, but not really. Whereas this is much more engaging, much more dynamic to listen to. Again, however, it is fatiguing, and I found that the Gate either matched or exceeded the BrainDance here in terms of overall resolution and detail retrieval, kind of like the Mega5Est, but the XuanWu Gate is packing a little bit more of that forwardness to those details like the BrainDance. So these two, I think, is a bit more of a even fight than maybe these two would be. Finally, we come to the AFUL Cantor, priced at $800 US. I personally think that these two sets are sort of kindred spirits of each other. They both are trying to go for that analytical, detail, high resolution, sound, while trying to keep their pricing relatively low for the level of performance you get. Cantor is like, 4-digit details, 3-digit price. BrainDance is going for like $900 details, $500 price. I think they both pull it off. They both have sort of crutches or prices to pay for that performance. On the Cantor, it's clearly the nozzles and the insertion depth, those length mode issues that you get depending on how you put it in your ear. And for the BrainDance, it's going to be that fatigue and those thinner lower mids. The Cantor is, in my opinion, straight up more detailed and more resolving than the BrainDance. The way that I put it in my ears, it's also less fatiguing. If your ears let you get a deep enough seal so that the treble is in its Bruce Banner mode rather than the Hulk mode, then the Cantor is going to be an easy win, and it will be way less fatiguing than the BrainDance. The BrainDance, however, doesn't have sort of length mode issues if you put it in super deep or pull it out super shallow. The treble here stays mostly the same. It's just a bit fatiguing for me personally. It's a lot easier for people to get the intended tuning on the BrainDance than it is with the Cantor. However, if the intended tuning is fatiguing to your particular ears, then it doesn't really matter, does it? In terms of tuning, the Cantor continues the sort of story here. Less sub-bass, richer, warmer lower mids, smoother, more detailed treble. But again, this comparison is less fair. This is $300 more than the BrainDance at MSRP, and with those nozzles carrying the potential to be a big problem spot for people, you could think of the BrainDance as a safer option versus the Cantor. I certainly think of it that way. You save $300, you get less detail, less resolution, but if you can handle the treble, this is a much more consistent experience from person to person than the Cantor can be. Alright, let's do a quick wrap-up here. Of everything here on the table, the BrainDance is the cleanest, leanest, and most transparent in the lower mids. It also has the sort of nicest sub-bass. It's where the entire bass boost is focused. It gives you that sort of separate subwoofer feeling to the tuning. To my ears personally, it is the most fatiguing of the ones on this table, but it is stealth fatigue rather than immediate fatigue, which is something you can kind of live with. If you just keep turning the volume down, you can still get a good experience here. SLT6, cheapest set here, very well controlled treble and bass. Might not be the most detailed set here, but it's the most affordable, and I think it represents a pretty good value proposition, especially if you're treble sensitive here. Next, Mega5Est, representing the JM1 tuning. Really needs no introduction or explanation here. People have waxed lyrical about how good this thing is. Compared to the BrainDance, it is richer, warmer, just fuller sounding, not as fatiguing for me in the treble. The XuanWu Gate, to my ears, the most neutral set here. It's got similar sort of sub-bass forward sound like the BrainDance, but it's nowhere near as rumbly or present as the BrainDance. It's got an upper treble boost like the BrainDance, but it's more subdued. The sort of upper mids and lower treble is much smoother. Extremely clean sounding, and again, less fatiguing than the BrainDance. Finally, you have the Cantor, another set that's going all out for detail, and because of it, is flawed. Like I said, these two are sort of spiritual, sisters, if you will, with each other. It's the most detailed set here. It has the highest resolution, the safest treble, provided you can mount it as the manufacturer intended, which not everybody can. So yeah, 3001 BD here, the BrainDance. I think it's a Cantor that is more consistent, maybe not as resolving, maybe not as detailed, but more consistent. So now it's time to see where the BrainDance is going to end up on the Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale. This is a very interesting one for me. It reminds me, as I keep saying, of the Cantor. It's trying to give you the analytical and technical performance of a set that costs way more money than this and succeeds, but because of that, it is flawed. It falls short in a few key areas. Some people are going to absolutely adore this tuning. That mid-bass tuck that I keep complaining about, it just means that the mids are just transparent. They're clean, clear, separation is wonderful. The details in that range are going to pop a whole lot more. Personally, I feel that by not giving that range just a little bit more energy, you're going to lose some of the nuance in performances, like the lower ranges of piano, guitar, bass guitar, other instruments, and that sort of lower range brass and a lot of orchestral music just loses some life to it. Regardless, the BrainDance has a lot going for it. The accessories package is, quite frankly, amazing. They nailed the looks and the industrial design of it. The sound is really great in terms of technicalities for the money, if you can handle it. And personally, for the music that I listen to with the stock sound signature, it's not bad. It is fatiguing. I can only listen to it, like I said, for 45 minutes to an hour. But what I did here, I did like. So it's going to go, like the Cantor, in but I like this, and for the same reasons. The fatigue isn't piercing. It's not painful. It makes me lower the volume. But it sets in, like I said, reasonably stealthily at my typical listening volume. It reminded me in that way of the Estrella. You know, I could get like 45 minutes to an hour out of it before I needed to rest my ears, and I could turn the volume down a decent amount with these and still get good performance because of the way it's tuned. Now, just because I put it in but I like this doesn't mean to say that I don't think Dunu has a winner here. I just can't recommend it to as many people as I might like. If you're treble sensitive, particularly in the upper treble, I don't think this will be for you. At the same time, if you prefer richer, warmer, more lush lower mids, this is not going to be for you unless you have, like I said, an impedance adapter laying around. There's enough sub bass and treble energy here that this is not for people who are looking for a more neutral sound. It's more fun than I think people who want a neutral sound would want. If, however, you're looking to score, honestly, some of the best detail retrieval and sort of technical analytical performance at $500, I don't have much experience in this price point, but I'm hard-pressed to think of a set that comes close to the type of technical chops that this thing has. I would also say that if you know for a fact that you've lost some of the ability to hear those higher frequencies, this might be just what the doctor ordered. It's boosted enough that it might give you a bit more of that detail at the high end. No, it's not the airiest IEM that I've heard, but it's got to be somewhere in the top 20%. Also, I would say if you're looking for an analytical sound that's very detail forward, but that has the ability to have a bunch of fun in that sub bass, I think this can be a sort of halfway point between a true, super exciting, super overblown V-shaped set that sacrifices all the details, and like the XuanWu Gate here, a truly neutral experience that just is barely colored. This is more colorful than the XuanWu Gate, but less colored than those deep V-shaped sets that sacrifice all the details. It's a pretty good middle ground, if you will. And that's going to do it for my review of the Dunu BrainDance. If it was just that tiny bit calmer in the treble and had a little bit richer lower mid-range, it might work really well for me. Like I said, honestly, the impedance adapter here might be the play. If this goes on sale for the right price, I think I can see myself picking one up and doing the whole impedance adapter every once in a while thing to mix it up and make it, more my style. Massive shout out to Tha Slaya once again for the loan here. Check out his reviews in the description. Sorry it took me so long to do this. Was waiting for the Cantor to get fixed, wanting to get some other things in to compare. I really appreciate your patience. And I also appreciate all of you watching. Thank you so much for all your continued support. I really hope you enjoyed the video. That's going to be it for the moment, but this has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.